MLK was not MLK when he was born. His father changed his name, which used to be Michael. And that's how he changed his son's name with the word junior. It's a memory a lot of Americans cherish. Muslim Americans were part of civil rights movement. They were among the prominent names at that time. What is it which Muslims can learn today? Someone who grew up in the home of civil rights movement, who is the editor of the only Muslim weekly which we have in America, Muslim Journal, Sister Ayesha K Mustafaa is with us. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, sir. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you for sparing your time. So, what are your memories of growing up when Dr. King was marching around the country?
Well, I was a young girl growing up in Mississippi, specifically in the area of Canton, Mississippi. My father was a civil rights advocate and worker, on the ground soldier. And we knew that we were in desperate times, literally, young African-American children. And that's why Dr. King spoke so poignantly about young children having their rights in his speech, I Have a Dream. But conditions and circumstances were dire. They were critical. You know, we didn't just get voting rights, the right to even in a restaurant to sit at a counter. We didn't have those rights automatically. We weren't born with those rights. So the men and women like Dr. Martin Luther King, like my father, like so many others who have also paid the ultimate price, they paid a hefty price just for us to have basic rights in this country, the country that we were born in the country that our foreparents were brought here enslaved, we being the descendants of slaves, but yet we, with the Emancipation Proclamation, did not bring us all our full citizenship rights. So it was men like Dr. King who marshaled on the movement until we got full citizenship rights that we have to continue to protect today and advance today and shepherd today.
You know, when was the first time you came to know about I Have a Dream speech? Was it in a school? Was it instantaneously in the school, or you knew it outside the school?
The Dr. King speech was on August 28, 1963. And it was broadcast. That movement at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., keep in mind now, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have social media, we didn't have Facebook, Instagram, but the crowd was phenomenally large, and the people poured out in D.C. at the Lincoln Memorial, and it became a mainstay. August 28, 1963. I was giving my age away. I was 12 years old. And it permeated the air. You know, if we had a radio, it was most of the radio and the news and the newspapers that emphasized the speech of Dr. King. Some of the media were against the civil rights movement, and they would not broadcast it fairly. They would not give him his full coverage in the media. So even among those in the media, it was a struggle. Those who would promote Dr. King's message and bring it to the forefront, and those who would try to stifle it, to keep it away from us.
Whatever is happening in our country today, what do you think he will be the most disappointed by if he was living today?
The most disappointment as we are facing now is the write-in votes issues, the issues that are facing us with write-in votes, and the potential for it to backslide. You know, the former president, Barack Obama, and Eric Holder, the former attorney general, work on a program that's called All on the Line. And it monitors and emphasizes to keep an eye on gerrymandering. We have the right to vote that Dr. King marshaled in and literally paid for it ultimately with his life. We have the right to vote, but even now, those rights can be diluted, not directly taken away, but they can be presented in such a way that you don't have the full force of the right to vote. For gerrymandering in our communities, we see them redrawing voting district maps, and they're drawing them in a way that a contortionist must have drawn them, because they're dividing people groups up where they would dilute the black vote, they would dilute the Hispanic vote, they would emphasize white Americans' votes. And just as Donald Trump mentioned in his last piece that he posted on air, now you have to watch who's counting the vote. And these types of things would disenfranchise people as much as the laws that the Jim Crow laws that didn't allow African Americans to vote. Back then, my father would have been asked when he went to the voting polls, tell me how many jelly beans are in this jar. That was the test that black men were given when they went to vote. Nowadays, you don't have those kind of tests, but the dilution, the diluting of the ability to get to the polls and have polls within your district, like some districts in Texas, they say in one county, they only have one polling station, one polling precinct available for a whole county. So these types of things where you have the right to vote, but there are obstacles put in your way to get to the polls. And I think that would be very troubling to Dr. King at this time.
I mean, the Democrats have promised that by this MLK Day, they will have a voting right legislation. They don't have anything like that. And that's the reason probably when President Biden went to Georgia, I mean, a whole lot of leaders didn't even show up because that is one thing which is so basic to democracy, right to vote. And here it was not given. It requires a struggle. It requires martyrs. It requires lynching. I mean, when you go to the museum in Montgomery, Alabama, where, you know, the lynching monuments and all of that, and you see, man, just to vote, you have to go through all of that. And now it seems to be in a reverse gear. So I fully agree with you on that. What are the lessons for the Muslim community from the struggle of civil rights movement and Dr. King?
The lesson is to know the history of the country that you are coming into. As an immigrant and as a Muslim, you have the right to the full citizenship of this country. However, you should also know the history and be, as Dr. King and the civil rights people say, and be on the right side of history. And these civil rights laws that Dr. King and so many died for trying to establish and to get passed, these are the very same civil rights laws that immigrants from any country of any walk of life can use also to defend their own rights. And so we have to know this very basic history. And it is a hard history to understand, because now as we see with the many school districts are pushing back against having certain parts of our history taught in the schools, because as one person said, one white gentleman said, you're going to have our children hating us. So imagine that your history is so bad that you fear that if it's taught in its accuracy, that your children will actually grow up to hate you. And that's not just an off-the-cuff remark, because there were certain circumstances. For example, the Birmingham church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama. There were 4 little black girls at church that morning, and they were killed in the church bombing that was set off by white Klansmen in Birmingham. When years later, the men who did that bombing were not prosecuted for the murders of those 4 girls. But years later, one of them was bragging about the bombing at his home residence And his granddaughter, a young white girl, heard it, and she was so disgusted until she turned her grandfather in. She said that she could testify that she had heard him say that he was responsible for that bombing that killed those 4 young girls. And years later, she appeared on Oprah Winfrey with the sister of one of the bomb victims of that church. But true enough, we're not saying that everybody is cut from the quote unquote the same cloth. Some people will be moved in different ways by this history, but it's a history that we must share and let it have its impact on those who want to advance good or promote civil rights.
One part of that history is that it was not Dr. King who challenged the racial immigration policies. There will not be many of the Asians who are in this country at this moment. He was the one during the civil rights movement challenged the racial policies of immigration as well. What will be, the time has passed. What are the things do you think he will, if he is here today, he will be proud of?
He would be proud that we realized and experienced having an African American president in this country. That the voting experiences that we had actually led to a African American lead in this country. That was no small matter from people who descendants of former slaves, and having to go through all of this turmoil to get the right to vote itself, and then be able to vote into office one of our own, an African American. And I think he, as has been revealed also recently, former President Obama wrote a letter to the late Senator Harry Reid. And in that letter, Obama expressed that if it had not been for Harry Reid, his presidency would not have been possible. And so I think Dr. King would also acknowledge there were many people behind the scenes. There were many Caucasians. There were many Jewish people. There were many people from different walks of life who backed his movement, who were not in the forefront, but they were constantly backing his efforts in the civil rights efforts. And I think he would be proud that we still have those type of supporters that are not in the forefront, but they're prominent and they're strong and they're determined that this country keeps moving forward.
Well, thank you so much, Ayesha K Mustafaa, editor-in-chief of the only Muslim weekly Muslim journal. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.